The strike was lost and we had to return to work. Again, not a very pleasant experience. Not only had the strike destroyed the mining industry, it really had destroyed the people who had chosen to work, because there was a dawning realisation that they had, in fact, lost that particular battle, and that their pits were closed as well. So when the redundancy programme came in, I decided to apply for redundancy and then move back to Scotland. Not to the mining industry at all, but to entirely different types of employment.
Violence was not unusual in this volatile situation in which both sets of men found themselves. Frustrations due to the longevity of the strike sometimes led to many arrests. This meant that some miners went to prison, which inevitably cost them their jobs.
The peculiar thing was that most of the local officers who worked in Ayrshire and were involved in the miners' strike, most of them, in fact probably every single one of them, would have some connection with the mining industry, whether it would be a direct, like my father, or a distant relative like one of your cousins, or your mother's cousin. They would know somebody in the picket lines. And it was really very difficult. The issue for us though, again I can maybe give you a wee anecdote, was that on one occasion at Hunterston, there was busloads would come from every division of Strathclyde obviously, and there was a team come down from, a busload of police officers came from Govan, and they were behind what was the old U Division officers at the time, North Ayrshire, officers from North Ayrshire. And they had a particularly good rapport with the local miners, and when right, it was time to shove boys, and they would then talk to them and use the gift of the Scottish tongue that their mother had given them, and could converse, and actually started to create a relationship. That was crucially important. And what happened when all these other people arrived and who were behind, they didn't have that. And they were of the opinion that violence would be the way to answer this. And that at times caused a great deal of conflict. And one of the ways of resolving that was, I'll give you an example, and it's quite it was an officer who's now an inspector here told me he was working at the Barney, and the buses were coming in, there was a bit of the pushing and shoving, and at one point an officer from Glasgow had actually leaned in and punched. They couldn't identify who it was, but had actually punched a miner, and the miners were up in arms about this. So the next pushing and shoving, suddenly there was a break in the police ranks, and a tackety boot with a metal shoe cap came through, and an officer ended up with a particular party's anatomy in distress and lying on the ground, and then the police ranks closed again. And all you heard from the back was, "Thanks boys, right, keep shoving." And that was the miners thanking the officers in the front row for allowing them a wee bit of summary justice. And there were many stories that could be told along that line. And there was another one I was witness to one very similar, but not quite as strategic at the placement of the tackety boot at Hunterston. And I mean, there was one occasion at Hunterston we were actually playing football with the miners while we were waiting for the lorries. Do you know? And that's why I say, as I said earlier, it wasn't, as the media painted it, the police versus, in many occasions down in England, it would appear to have been like that. And I'm not saying the relationship we had with the miners here was perfect, it wasn't. But there was a better relationship here than I think there was in other parts of the country. And I think one of the reasons for that is, I mean, I'll give you, for example, Harry Corrigan, who was the chief superintendent in this division at the time, his briefing on the first day at Hunterston was, remember, when this is all over, we still require to police these communities. I think the relationship started to deteriorate after the initial surge of picketing, mass picketing at various places was over. Because what happened then was there was miners and people who worked within Scottish coal or the mining industry, not actually miners but doing various other jobs, started to go back to work in dribs and drabs, and those who were still out on strike became understandably quite bitter against their colleagues, and that created a lot of friction in mining communities, particularly places like Cumnock and New Cumnock and various other villages in East Ayrshire. And what happened then was the police had to go in and try and draw the line between, and and as well as having the responsibility of ensuring public safety, and having worked constantly at ensuring that the highways were free for lorries who wished to move legitimately, to move against mass pickets, we're now in a different situation. And that, I think that initial surge of you know, keeping the highways free and doing what we did, and some of the issues that arose out of that because of government and political decisions, combined with the fact that we're now trying to get between basically some internal internecine warfare, if you like, between mining families, caused the relationship to go downhill, especially when men who were arrested and who were on strike but were arrested for most of it was pretty minor crimes and offences. It was breach of the peace or minor assault. I'm talking about Ayrshire. I know there was incidents in Wales where people actually committed murder, but in real terms here it was pretty minor offences. Although there was quite a few arrests, got to be said, over the peace, over the 9-10 months. That caused, because they all lost their jobs, that caused lots of difficulties. At the end of the strike, my own personal view would be that the mining communities in the south part of East Ayrshire in particular, and the police had a very, very poor relationship. And I also believe that that relationship has never truly recovered. I was fortunate enough to be posted to Cumnock as a Chief Inspector in 1997, and one of the things the then Divisional Commander told me was, we need some bridges built, because there are still difficulties in working with the communities. And at the end of the day, as a police officer, I'm a public servant, and I require to serve the communities that I'm fortunate enough and privileged enough to be required to police. And I went to Cumnock with one thought in my mind, that we needed to start talking to people, and the result of that was I was a pretty, in local media terms, a pretty high profile, and that was deliberate, and it wasn't to blow a trumpet or to make myself or to aggrandise myself in any way, shape or form. It was to try and get the message across that I was here to serve them, and I was a local boy and I was prepared to do that. And now, as a superintendent covering the whole of East Ayrshire, my views are pretty much the same. I still think that we've a ways to go, although it's nowhere near as bad as it was in the late 80s, early 90s, in relation to how the police and the communities and I'll give you an example. I went to Cumnock, and one of the cleaners in Cumnock office, who I'm not going to name, used to come into my office every morning, empty the buckets and stuff, and she would stay and have a wee blather for 2 minutes, and away she would. And we're talking one day about the miners' strike. She actually said, I don't like you, Polish. You looked up my man. And she had worked as a cleaner in Cumnock Police Office for over 20 years. And that type of bitterness, I think, takes an awful long time to go, because you can understand that in their eyes, the fact that we actually arrested somebody and they were then latterly convicted in a court of law, and as a consequence were left without a means of earning a living, meant that, you know, somebody had to get the blame, and it's really easy to blame the police at times. And I don't have an issue with that, but that was the type of atmosphere that I went in as a Chief Inspector at Cumnock, and as I say, it proves that it's still not 100%, although it's a lot better than it was. And I think the fact that these communities, as I said earlier, mining communities have a community spirit. It's not like living in a big city. It's not like living in a big town like Cumnock. You know, the village of Auchinleck identifies very much with the village of Auchinleck, and if it doesn't matter where you are in life, if you're an Auchinleck boy or girl, you always will be, and you identify, and that's the community spirit that you find in these places. And even people who have become particularly successful and come from small mining villages still identify with that small mining village. And I'm guilty of that myself, I've got to be honest and say. And it's just a fact of nature, the way that the communities, and I suppose if we're talking about nostalgia and viewing it from the point of view that, you know, perhaps we are overly fond of our memories in relation to the way we thought it was. The truth of the matter is, growing up as a boy in a mining community, for me, was a marvellous thing. And my memories of it, whilst I suppose are tinted through the rose-coloured glasses of nostalgia, are very, very positive. because it was a time, and I suppose growing up in the 50s and early 60s as I did, it was a time when we were just coming out of a world war, and I mean I was a boy and was still rationing and petrol and stuff like that, and growing up through that and finding a community that pulled together and didn't commit crime against itself. You know, and it was a shock to me joining the police. I remember coming to Kilmarnock and joining the police and finding out that somebody who lived 2 doors from you would break into your house and steal your property. That didn't happen in a mining community. It just didn't happen. There were people who broke into houses. I'm not saying it was crime free, but it was, in relative terms, it just didn't happen to the same level as it did in big towns. A lot of difficult times during the miners' strike as a police officer, and there's lots of things I think that there were decisions made in relation to strategic activity that perhaps in retrospect we shouldn't have made. I think stopping people on the highway, for example, and telling them they weren't wanted in a particular area because we didn't want mass picketing. Nowadays that would be perfectly legal. I don't have an issue with it because we have reformed the law, but in those days I don't think we had the legal right to do that, and that was one of the issues for me. And one of the things I used to tell the officers who work for me all the time was, remember, they're human beings, and we really need to build up a relationship with them just the same, because apart from anything else, there's more of them than us. And at the end of the day, we're here to just keep public order and maintain public safety. We're not here to make political decisions about who's right or who's wrong. And at the end of the day, I suppose in some ways the miners lost heavily, which was unfortunate, because we now have communities, and I see communities ravaged through, take Newcomer, 80% of men don't work. Women work in Newcomer. You know, if you're a boy growing up in Newcomer now, your mother's a cleaner at the school, or she's working in a local shop or whatever, that doesn't work, because there's no work. And when I grew up, it was more or less full employment in the mines. A lot of negative things about working in the pit. It wasn't the best environment to actually earn your living in, but it was a living. You could feed your family, you could maintain a standard of living. And the great thing about mining communities is they spent their money. Local shops prospered, local businesses did well, people went on holiday, you know, away to Blackpool every summer or wherever. They spent their money. You know, they lived their life and they spent their money, and they enjoyed themselves. The consequence of the demise of the mining industry, whether you're a part of the mining industry or not, but if you live in East Ayrshire, or if you live in many other communities in east of Scotland, in Fife, or in the Edinburgh area, which have exactly the same effect on them. The issue is now we have lots of villages which were created specifically for mining industry that no longer function. I mean, it's social deprivation. That's why the whole of the south part of East Ayrshire, the former Cumberland Valley, is a social inclusion area. You know, and the statistics on it are frightening. It's the highest travel to work ratio in Britain. It's the highest single parent, teenage mother ratio in Britain. You know, we have drug figures that are astonishing in relation to the community that's involved in. All these sort of things, my opinion, and this is just Jim Thompson talking, this is no a professional opinion in relation to policing, but in my opinion, the biggest single issue is we did away with all the indigenous industry in one fell swoop without any strategic infrastructure to replace it. And I'm not talking about creating jobs and making jobs. I'm talking about strategic infrastructure. I'm talking about thinking ahead and saying, right, we're going to run down the mining industry in Ayrshire. How do we get jobs into Ayrshire? Real jobs that are going to be long term. And that needs strategic thought, and it needs infrastructure. For example, the A70 from here. Why not make it the M70 from here? And when it hits the motorway at Douglas Water in Lanarkshire, we then have a direct link to the industrial heartland of the south of this country. That alone would have compensated for thousands of jobs. And that wasn't done. And I think, again, this is just personal opinion, but I think that the impact of that is still there to be seen. And what I would say to anybody is, go for a walk. Walk these communities, talk to the people. Don't talk the talk, walk the walk. And I do it regularly. And I was born in New Cumnock. I was born in a house called Smithfield in Connell Park, which was full of mine and Ross, just across from Lochshinnock Mine. They've been knocked down a long time, but New Cumnock was a very buoyant, thriving community, and I remember going up there in 1997 as a chief inspector and walking about, and it was heartbreaking to see the fact they're knocking all the houses down. The place is depopulated. From a village of 7,000 it's down to less than 2. Crime in relative terms in comparison to the size of the place is, you know, at that time it's changed a wee bit now, it's a wee bit better now, but it's still particularly high. Cumnock itself, an area that I'm very, very familiar with, having grown up in the town. Again, pockets of deprivation that you associate with inner cities, no mining communities. Auchinleck, a real, to me, sad, because when I remember my gran who lived in Well Road in Auchinleck, which is right in the centre of the village basically. I used to go up there, and the place was vibrant, it was thriving, and now it's got particular difficulties, especially in relation to the abuse of heroin. And whilst I don't know that the fact that we had mines still working would detract from that, I am firmly of the opinion that it has had a major impact. I was asked by a member of Scottish Parliament, as a very naive chief inspector, just exactly what the Scottish Parliament could do to prevent crime and help the communities in the south part of East Ayrshire. And my answer was simple: give us jobs. Because I firmly believe that if we give somebody the ability to earn their living and give them a bit of pride in their ability to get on in life, then we're going to lessen their need to abuse substances. And I don't think you need a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to work that out.
Sadly, all that remains for the former employees of this once thriving industry are memories of a bygone age, which have now been largely overlooked by the younger generation.